Hey, yo, this is Danny Boy, founding member of House of Pain, La Coca Nostra, and the executive director of the Outsiders House Museum in Tulsa, Oklahoma. And you're watching Good Company. Stay gold.
Hey guys, my name's Scott Bowling. Today I'm with the man that's taller than I am and more. He's just the man. Stronger, better looking.
Yeah, for sure.
Dude, you got a pretty mouth. Thank you, brother.
Thanks for the interview.
All right.
Nice.
Dude, man.
You're not lying though, you know what I mean? Am I
know,
good looking
man.
or am I good looking?
Dude, yeah. I saw him and I fell in love right away. Right when we first started the interview, right when he first got here, he pulled my seat close to me. I was like, this is going to be nice.
And he said he wanted to do some close-ups. I didn't know what kind of close-up we were talking.
Dude, I've been doing Good Company for about 4 years, and my wife was like, when I told her you were going to be on the show, it was the first time she's like, oh my God, like you're making it now. Like we saw you on Hulu for Kid 90.
Yeah.
And people haven't seen that. You definitely check it out. It's so good. Documentary, Hulu. How did you get involved with that? Did she just randomly?
Because I was involved with Soleil's life, yeah. So if you're at home and you're like, who is this guy going on about being good looking? We were joking before, so it carries over. It's not real. Not that part, Scott. Anyway, let me back it up.
Yeah.
Because it's all. There was a little, I flew in here. It's like the end of COVID, hopefully.
Oh yeah.
Beautiful flight.
I'm like, oh yeah. Like,
great driver.
Yeah, great.
We
amazing.
pull in, and then the hotel was like,
oh, it's gorgeous.
So we've switched it. I get here, you're living in paradise, right on the lake, and we hit it off immediately because you love the same stuff I do, which is pop culture.
Yes.
So now I feel like we're old friends. That being said, Kid 90, yes, it's kind of given a second wind or third wind or a more, luft to my balloon. Mm-hmm. And you asked how did I get involved in that? I grew up, we made a rap record. I met Soleil Moonfry, for those at home who don't know what I'm talking about. Kid 90 is her documentary. Soleil Moonfry is or was or is both Punky Brewster. It's a TV show in the 80s. I never watched the show.
Not me either, but I've always knew about it.
But I always knew who Soleil was. I meet her at a very precarious time, and backing up to, we had this before, but for those of you watching it, you weren't there. So, you grew up middle class, and there was not high hopes for me. I come from a long line of addict, alcoholic, very violent home life and stuff like that. And my mother's mantra is you'd be dead or in prison by the time you're 21. And right as I was like 21, we made a record, and the record did really well. And the complete world shifts for you, or for me in that case. And it was almost like a Twilight Zone. I started getting panic attacks and I was hearing everything but the negative. You guys are going to be massive stars. This is incredible. So people who used to hate me were like, hey dude, long time. When are we going to hang out? And it's like, it is like a bizarro. And anybody who's come up and had that kind of success in that area, especially in music or film or whatever, there is a time where the life you once knew is completely gone. And here's your new life. And the weird thing about it, it doesn't mostly last for most people. There's that arc, or the whatever the trajectory is.
When did panic set in when all this, you're talking about panic attacks?
Immediately when people start saying, you guys are going to be famous, you guys are going to be rich, I'm just, thinking of things with people. I had never heard that before. Yeah. I heard you're going to be just like your father, dead or in prison. I heard all of the expletives of someone who's always up to no good. I did nothing for a living. I had a 9th grade education, still have a 9th grade education. And saw Scarface and thought, this is a great career path for me. So I was always doing credit card theft and drug dealing and just stupid. And I say this now, not to I'm just telling you, coming full circle recovery-wise, this is just who I was at the time. And that was like cool guy stuff, when you're out there running and gunning, that's applauded. As a 52-year-old man, it's atrocious. And I look back and there's no, recalling that doesn't bring any that was kind of cool. That was a period. I paid for it long term, but I also did a lot of stupid.
When House of Pain first started and you knew your past, did you ever like, I'm never going to do that again. I'm never going to do the petty stuff.
I'm like, now we're getting paid to do that.
Really?
No. In hip hop at that time, so I'm just going to tell you about Soleil. So when I meet Soleil, it's right at the start of things are getting big. And she had already been through this before. She was a child star. So I could confer in her and I believed her. Where other people, you don't believe the advice because it's garbage advice and they've never been there. It's like asking a mechanic about plumbing. Like, what is he going to tell you? You need a plumber to tell you about, like, you know, or a mechanic to. So, she was like a confidant in that way. You know what I mean? And I always adored her and hold her on high. And it wasn't until years later that, you know, we connected in a physical way, you know, a sexual way like that. Because at the time it was like little sis, you know, like my buddy. And also, again, I knew she was like a household name, a celebrity. That was also cool. But I could always trust her. And everything around me was changing so fast, it was terrifying.
So you met her right as like
right as we were starting to pop, right then. And so it was great. And she was always a pleasure to be around. One of one. I met a lot of people.
How often did you see her? Because you're on tour
all the
and stuff.
time.
Really?
No, because so somewhere along the line, I think Samuel or somebody gave her a camera, and that camera that you see in the documentary, if you've seen it, it looks like a really fat iPad. And this is the first camera that I remember, probably the first ever that had like where you didn't have to look in the hole, or a little fold-out one where the screen was like the size of.
Oh yeah.
So
okay,
she
so
could
it wasn't
hold
like
it up,
on the
and
shoulder.
she brought it around, and I guess they were paying her or gave her cameras to send in footage they were doing, and then she decided to just bring it everywhere.
What did you think about that when she puts it on you?
At first, it was not good. You know, because you're like, dude,
it's kind of awkward, right?
It's awkward, and then you forget about it, just like anything else. It's like being on a live mic when you're sitting in your kitchen. Who knows what I said? It's probably all bad. Sell it back to me at one point, you know. if things go, you know. But
on her documentary, it seemed like they were going to do a part 2. Maybe I wonder if there'll be more footage of you guys.
So she does this documentary. So we run in the golden era. She's there through most of that stuff. And then unfortunately, as House of Pain comes to an end, I become a drug addict around that same time. And like I said, you know, you pull the people the closest to you down the fastest and first. And so I don't know if it was just divine intervention or whatever, but there was a time where I was like, okay, like, just leave her alone. You know what I mean? She was naive and trusting in a way that I could probably do irreparable damage. Because again, when the money's gone and the fame has waned and you're like, you grab too. And thank God she was just meeting her future husband and, you know, our paths disengage. So I don't see her for 20 years.
Not at all. You don't talk to her for 20 years?
No. This is obviously, again, this is going back to the late 90s. So there wasn't even the internet or whatever. So I don't see her, I don't even hear from her until, I'm going to guess, terrible with dates. Let's call it 2018. Yeah, about 2018, maybe 2017. I'm driving from LA to Tulsa, and we'll get into, you know, why. But I was going back and forth a lot. And I remember it was like yesterday. This is significant to me because I always, you know, I had always thought highly of Soleil and loved Soleil. And I was literally in a rest stop in the urinal. May or not been sitting down when it was like ding, and it was like I look at my Instagram, which is still kind of new, and I was like, "What is the message?" It's like Soleil Moonfire followed you. I was like, "Uh-oh." I didn't know if that might be
that may her right there.
I was like, "Uh-oh," and there's an "uh-oh" because again, like it was like so excited, so terrified. Oh my God, why is she? What the? Okay. Be cool.
Do you think about your response for me? Just
no,
like,
I didn't even say anything. It was just she followed you, you know?
Oh,
and she
yeah,
might have had a blue
message
check when nobody had a blue check. So I was like, okay, yeah. My mind's going a million miles an hour.
Yeah.
And then I think shortly after, I was like, hey, what's going on? Long time. And I was like, oh, okay, good, you know? And then we started to talk. And then eventually, pretty soon after, maybe it seems soon after, but I feel like within the couple months of us just, you know, hi, good to see you, long time, hope everything is well. Yes, things are very good. I'm thinking about moving to Tulsa, you know, just small talk. She's like, hey, check it out. So I found all my diaries and all this old footage, and I think we're going to do a documentary. Hulu's going to, and I'm like, oh, you did? That's like someone, like I found the crime scene evidence, and we're retesting all the DNA. You're like, you did? Oh, great. So, you know, and you're the one who threw mama from the train, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Now they're going to reopen the case. So I was like, oh, that's fantastic. thinking, please leave me out of it, because I know,
Did you want to be left out of it though, for real?
in my mind, yeah. Because in my mind, I don't remember a lot of stuff. Not that I blacked it out or blocked it out for just, and it wasn't like I did atrocious things to people. I was just, when drug addicts and alcoholics are in their grips with their disease, everything comes second to you doing what you need to do, and that means everything. And everybody's usable, and everybody's, and for me, again, like I said, that looks like the people in your closest to, they get hurt the first. You know what I mean? And so I don't know the damage. I knew that she felt a certain way about me, and I felt a certain way about her, but we never kind of, the timing and the things were always just, and then all of a sudden I'm a drug addict, and it was just, she was there for me when a lot of people couldn't be, they were already seeing the writing on the wall, and I get away from him. When you get to a certain point where it's that bad, even closest people to you, I can't be around him anymore. And most people were done with me, and she was still hanging on. And that's kind of like where she meets her husband, her future husband, and it was like, I didn't see her again. So yes, I was nervous about what does this look like. And then being from Hollywood long term, I mean, I'm a New Yorker who grew up in Hollywood. I know also when someone goes, I got something coming out. Sure you do. Not that she wouldn't, but I know incredible productions that are still shelved or get sold to like, Canadian TV or, somewhere they play in Czechoslovakia late night. So I was like, and never thinking that this is going to really come to fruition. Yeah. So then she doesn't talk about it for a little bit longer, and then all of a sudden she's like, hey, when can you come to LA? LA, when can you come to LA? And I'm like, Soleil, I'm like taking heavy fire here in Tulsa trying to get my museum up. And it was like the last like mile of that journey. It was like 3.5 years to build the museum that I built. And the last,
Definitely
the last mile of a marathon is always the toughest one. And I was like, I just can't leave. And she's like, well, what about in December? I said, December what? She's like, December 12th. I said, so that's my birthday. I don't know that my then wife was going to be cool with that. She's like, what if we come to Tulsa? I'm like, if you come to Tulsa, then I can do the interview. Again, I didn't even think it was going to turn into anything like what it was. And then she spent 3 days in Tulsa. I hadn't seen her in 20-something years.
And what was that like, first seeing her?
Yeah, it was incredible because I felt like no time had ever been lost.
Did you set her up a hotel like the one I set you up with?
No, she stayed in the hotel that I live in, which is 5-star.
Oh, that's good.
And I just showed her Tulsa. I showed her what we're doing at the museum. She actually had our old manager, Amanda Demi, who was working on that production with her, was doing all the still photography and cool stuff like that. So there was a lot of familiarity with all the people, and it was like I never had not seen her. It was like 20 years has disappeared, and there we were. And it was beautiful for me because I felt like I get to make an amends. Now, what you don't know is you see, there's 3 days worth of, 8-hour, 10-hour days of filming, and it gets deduced into.
You would have that long filming? 10?
Yeah.
It's almost like a reality show for 3 days. So the camera's always rolling the whole time?
Always mic'd up to for the most part. We would do an hour or so, and then we'd break, and then I'd say, hey, we meet us over downtown by the park, and then we just talk about what she remembered, what her diary said, what the recordings remember, whatever. Yeah. And for me, it was great because I was able to give the amends that I felt was always due.
A little closure?
Yeah, in that sense of like, listen, I was going through it, and I was on a downward spiral, and I probably pulled you, down a lot with me, and I apologize for that. And there's no excuse for it, but and my experience with any of that stuff, even for other addicts, alcoholics who recovered, it's like the people that you hurt just want to see that you're doing better, and that you're not,
So can we go back a little bit when you were partying? How'd you get sober? Like, where did that? Did you hit rock bottom?
It's probably easier to tell you how I got high, which is a weird story too. And I'll tell you, growing up, I'm a native New Yorker who was raised in Los Angeles. Every summer, my mother would send me back because I had come from a broken home. My father was always in prison. My stepfather died of cirrhosis at 35. That's how hard he was drinking. And my mother just couldn't. She wasn't built for being, and she had to work around the clock. So it was easier for her to ship me back east every summer to my aunt and uncle who were apt to watch out. And for me, that's going back to an era where there's no internet and cell phones. So I'm going back to New York with like OP, Lightning Bolt, Vans. I mean, Vans was a regional shoe. You didn't get that unless you had a skateboard, or it wasn't even real skateboard magazines because it was after the skateboard rush. BMX was the thing. If you had a BMX mag, you maybe order Van Doren's from LA, but you couldn't get them in the mall. So people knew. Older kids were like, "Yo, you're from LA, right?" And I'm like, "Yo, how did you know?" I'm like, "Come on, man. I'm draped in it. I'm listening to Oingo Boingo and Fishbone. Nobody even knows what that is in New York." And then I'm coming back with Curtis Blow, Run DMC, Fat Laces, Pumas. So it was a cultural exchange.
Yeah.
Why I tell you that is that I was a b-boy from day one. I grew up in the roller rinks. I listened to all kinds of my mother's Motown records, funk records, the Gap Band, and Parliament. All that stuff was always something I loved. Cameo, all of it.
Yeah, man.
And then I'm into hip hop early. And in hip hop, one thing you cannot be, especially back then, it's changed, was a drug addict. You know, the hood is like, you can't be a snitch, you can't be a drug addict. You can sell drugs, but to do drugs is like a forbidden rule. I mean, think of any who's talking. Curtis Blow's the only one talking about white lines don't do it. I mean, it was, you could say what you want about hip hop even back then, but it was a drug-free environment. And that's not to say a lot of dudes were cloaking it. They were. And knowing what I know now, and reading the biographies I read, and knowing what I know, a lot of people were getting high behind closed doors. But it wasn't acceptable where it was in rock, where rockers were known to get high and do their thing. In hip hop, it was like, you either selling it or you using it. You're either all in or all out. So I stayed away from it. I always had a healthy fear of drugs. I did not really do drugs. You know, I dabbled once or twice on a weird little fluke in high school, but never and I sold crack cocaine, ecstasy, shrooms, never dabbled. Didn't even smoke weed. Weed was never my thing. I was just drinking. I don't get introduced to drugs until I start to see the writing on the wall, and House of Pain is starting to come back down to earth, and there's a little friction in the band, and records, we're not going on money tours anymore, and I'm spending it faster than I was making it, and I'm like, uh-oh. And drinking wasn't gonna fix that. And so I start to incorporate this nice little pill that's ecstasy. I'm like, this is great, I feel so good, and you know, but I can't do that habitually.
Yeah.
I can't do that every day. So I graduated to cocaine, and then cocaine is like blowing up a balloon and letting it go. I just didn't know if I was gonna be happy, crying on the floor, digging through the whatever, carpet looking. So I was like, this is terrible. And then one night, someone offered me what we were talking about earlier about Willie Nelson calls speed roadie coke.
Okay.
He's like, I don't do roadie coke, you know. Roadie coke, and it was methamphetamines, and in the 90s that was prevalent in Los Angeles, and I thought, shit, what do I got to lose? I'm already, I'm already just going through it. I would have done anything not to feel the way I was feeling, and so I tried meth, and for the first time, I feel like I did when I had that first drink. That you're just like, why did I wait so long to do this? This is the drug for me.
Were the other guys in House of Pain doing that too, or is it?
Never.
Really?
Never. No. We never did drugs as a band. I started to dabble at the end of House of Pain. I was also in an outlaw motorcycle club at the time, so methamphetamines was also prevalent in that situation, which I won't talk about on this because it just get me in some, hot water. But and maybe Eric was hearing whispers, and I even went to rehab through House of Pain at the end because of, my coke use. I just found it and overnight just went and dove in head first. And it took years to come out of that. So again, if you would have talked to me, even in my bad years of like selling and being a criminal and all that crazy stuff that I was doing, never did I do drugs. So that was the one good thing someone could say about me, But nothing was left off the table by the time the 90s were over. I had pretty much done every check of something that you shouldn't do as a human.
But the drinking kind of escalated. Was that what?
Yeah, I mean, and meth made my drinking, I could drink with impunity. I could just constantly drink and constantly stay up. For me, I felt like I was making up for lost time. You also understand that as House of Pain breaks up, Everlast goes on and sells 1 million records, gets a Grammy. Lethal goes to Limp Bizkit, and I'm like, what's wrong with me? Obviously, I'm garbage. And it's a trap in any vanity business where you start to go, if I am the record or I am the entity, and if the entity is not selling, then I'm shit. And that's not the truth. But it took me 20 years to figure out that like what I did for a living or what I do for a living, it doesn't have nothing to do with who I am as a person.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
But I didn't have that information prior. And
you didn't have like a mentor, somebody helping you.
No, I mean, I told you, like, Scarface, the movie, that was my that was like the blueprint, or a lot of rap records, a lot of tough guy rah-rah shit is all,
So how did you, so when all this is going, where did you hit rock bottom, man? Like, when did you?
In the late 90s, I mean, just doing meth around the clock, starting to get arrested, starting getting little cases in LA for, just getting in trouble. And I get sober around 2000, clean up. Within year one, I get a solo record deal. I'm working for The Firm, which was the management company that managed Korn and Limp Bizkit and
nice.
Deftones, I think, at one point as well. I'm working for their sneakers because they acquired Pony, the sneaker brand, and I knew everything about sneakers at the time. They gave me $500,000 for a group I had called X Supermodels. I probably spent most of that money on sneakers at the time for my
But
collection.
still,
was
things are
popping.
going good though, man.
In my first year of sobriety. This is year 1 of sobriety.
Didn't you do a solo album too?
That was it, the X Supermodel one.
Yeah,
but it got
okay,
shelved because their label folded.
Will that ever come out? By the way, I didn't mean to interrupt you.
Listen, it's your show.
No, man, I don't want to interrupt you.
It will come out as a non-fungible token, I think, when we were talking earlier.
Oh,
I'm gonna put it on
yes.
there. It's never been released.
Some rich kid overseas.
Hey, let him rock. So what I'm saying is, I get sober for 3 years. It goes really well at first. I get all kinds of money and I get the things back. And I think, oh, this is what sobriety is. I get clean and then all of a sudden I get my outside stuff back. But I stopped doing the work and it's an inside job. And that's what was wrong. And that's what's wrong with most addicts and alcoholics.
You stopped going to meetings and stuff?
Stop going to meetings, stop being of service, stop being of any use to anybody except for myself. I was back to the fear, the insecurity. I'm an egomaniac with low self-esteem. You know what I mean? And I think that the watch, the girl, the record, the clothes, the car fixes that. It does not. It might fix other people. It doesn't fix me. I've tried it to almost.
And you were dating somebody, right? That would. I remember hearing a podcast. Were you with someone at the time, or
multiple
people?
Yeah, I don't know what you're talking about. You got to be a little bit more clear. I'm like, well,
I'm
looking at my cards like, which one? Tell me what the card looks like.
How about we go? Anyway, so next,
I think what you're probably referring to, and this is, I'm laughing, so I'm going to bring it down. But I was dating Savannah, the porn star, when she killed herself. Right before I got sober. Yeah,
really? Okay.
During House of Pain. So, but this is Hollywood in a nutshell. I mean, there was just like Soleil on one side. I have pictures of Soleil and Savannah. Shannon is her name, and as a person, she was a completely normal and wonderful woman, but what she did for profession, which was like cool at the time, but I look back like, what an awful profession to have, and nobody likes. I can't imagine that's a damaging, it's a soul crushing business. So the 90s were a blur, and I remember as a kid, people said if you were in the 60s and you remember it, you weren't there. Like the 90s kind of worked that way as well. And it was an incredible experience because a guy like me, who was just a middle class, white kid from the San Fernando Valley per se, could make it over the hill, and we could all put a band together, and then we could be at the table with your favorite rock stars, actors, and we met and hung out. And 1 minute I'm nobody, and the next minute I'm there with Mickey Rourke and Madonna and this one and that one. That's how it. And if you don't think that changes it doesn't feel like a Twilight Zone episode. It does, and then it does something to you. And if you're not equipped for it, and I was not equipped for it, I have a very. My education is I'm a smart guy, but the education is I'm immature. All of these things, like I was stunted in that way because I never,
And you're getting all this money. I mean, you're just putting it in you're handling all
and
yourself.
in my mind, I was going to buy everything that I needed to buy that I didn't get as the kid. If you got a Lacoste, I was getting a Le Tiger. If you were getting a Red Line bike, I was getting a Raleigh Rampart. If you got a Roadrunner, I'm getting a Satellite. I'm always getting the knockoff brand. And so when I finally made money, I'm like, those days are over. So now I'm overspending and overcompensating for what I felt like. Again, it's all outside stuff.
Yeah.
And not for nothing, like the world, when you're a kid, you get pitched that these are the things that fix you.
Okay, around this time, I have so many questions, but around this time, the tours you went on, Cypress Hill, I mean, that's amazing. Korn, all these people.
Yeah, well, Cypress, so Everlast and me, we lived in the same neighborhood per se, in the same general vicinity. This is going back to the mid 80s. And there were a few hip hop venues. They were like old roller rinks. So the Sherman Square roller rink would have a hip hop event where like Bobby Jimmy and the Critters or UTFO would play, like early hip hop acts. It was like almost like a vaudeville thing where like defunct old venues that are no longer being used for anything and now the neighborhood has changed, they will book a hip hop show because, and so if you're in that show and you're a white guy and you look around the room, you're going to see maybe two other white guys. And that was like, oh, okay, I recognize dude. It's like, and you're up there, you're like, what's up? Everybody's in there like, yeah. And I see Eric, so I know he's real, and I know he's like one of the few handful of white B-boys. And so we ran in different circles, but they'd always, I'd see him at the mall, we worked at the same spot actually once. And it wasn't until years later, he'd already put a record out with Ice-T, which is, who in high school or like right after high school has a record with Ice-T? I mean, that was like, I was so impressed by that fact that somebody I knew had a record with Ice-T, and I was a fan of the record. And then I guess they depart and they go different ways. The record comes out, it doesn't really do much. Eric's looking for whatever the next thing is, and at the time I'm doing a lot of credit card theft, and I won't get into but I'll give you an example of what we used to do. I had an ability to have an ID made at the California driver's license were like thin, and you could remake them, and I had a guy who could come to your house, come to my apartment, pull down a screen. It was just a gray screen.
Yeah.
Take a photo of me, and then in 2 hours they would come back with whatever information I would ask for on that card. I would come to somebody like you, Scott, and say, Scott, I'm giving you $500. You're giving me all 3 of your credit cards. You're like, the fuck I am.
Yeah.
I'm like, Scott, you're going to call those in stolen. They're no good to you anymore. I'm giving you $500, which is the equivalent of like $1,200, $1,500 in today's money. And you're like, dude, I can't get busted or nothing. I'm like, they're dead cards. You're like, you're right. So you'd call them in, you'd sell those to me, and I'd take that photo, and then I would put your information, your name. So now I have a set of 3 cards. I could reprogram the chips, and there was no chips. They would reprogram the stripe. I couldn't do that, but someone else could do that.
Yeah, it'd be harder today.
Yes. No, anything is doable. I could reprogram those strips, and now
we can do a whole YouTube channel just on this stuff.
I can show you how. Well, it's 80s technology or early 90s, and then I would go out and I would go into establishments and I would steal. I guess I would go up and I'd buy $250 down comforters. At the time, that's like $500. You know, I'm buying halogen lamps and what I didn't do, so I didn't get arrested. I never bought Air Jordans. I never bought pull-out stereos. I never bought video cameras, because those are the number one things that are like, yeah, right. You're 17 and you're buying 3 video cameras for $1,200 a piece. Security, you know. So I never did that. I would go buy stuff and then I'd return it, get a gift, a gift certificate or whatever, and then I would sell that to you for half price. So I go $1,200, you give it to me for $750 in cash. I did a lot of that, and I was making a lot of sets for people. I knew a lot of people would sell me cards, so I had sets, and that's what you want in the game. The reason why you want that is because if one goes declined, no problem. I give you another one. They're like, ID, same thing. Oh yeah. Second one goes bad. They're like, guy, these are both. Hold on, I got you. Man, you disarm them at that point because there's 3 different.
Did you ever get caught? Was it?
I'm here, ain't I?
But
no, I never got caught. I got
a long
close.
time ago, though.
I got close. I've had them decline, and then they said, take the card, and the guy had it in a scissor, and I said, I dare you to cut that. What do you mean? They told me. I said, so some guy you never met on the phone's telling you that? I'm right here. Cut my card, watch what happens. They're like, they just hand it back.
And you're
I'm a
tall
big guy,
dude,
yeah,
man.
and I've lost a little weight too. But the point is I'm just reporting. I'm not bragging. I'm not trying to tell you. I look back and we laugh, and people remember me for that stupid stuff. But that's what I did. So when I met Eric, it was like, yo, bro, come get some of this. Like, I'll put you onto this. I'll get you this. And we started celebrating Everlast. And as we started to talk, we were like, yo, we should make a band. And I had worked at a record store for a couple of years, and I had a very massive collection. Again, most of that we helped ourselves to at the record store. I mean, I was a little criminal, bro. So I had 1,000 cassette tapes and maybe 1,000 CDs. I looked like a rich kid, but I wasn't, because of the credit cards.
Yeah.
You come into my condo and we look like we have a mansion. That looks like your place, Scott.
You got pictures of back in the day?
I wish.
Yeah.
I wish. No, dude, nobody just had it was like 110 film, and you're like, what are you gonna do with that? So me and Eric decided to put a group together. So what that has to do with Cypress Hill is that he did a demo with Quincy Jones' son, QD3. He did some demos with Danny Saber, who was another great dude who did a lot of stuff for like Billy Idol and NXS and whatever. And finally, he gets with Muggs again, and Muggs and him knew each other from the Rhyme Syndicate days, from 7A3 and Everlast Solo. And Muggs is doing Cypress, that's his new group. And we started working with them, and Eric disappears one day and he comes back with 3 songs, Jump Around, Put Your Head Out, and Come and Get Some of This. I played it in my living room and I was like, it's all over about the shouting. I mean, this is like a hit. And at that point, all my friends, you used to come in my spot. My spot was the go-to spot. I lived in Melrose, off of Melrose.
How old
in
were you?
Hollywood.
When was your spot?
Like 19.
Oh man, it's fresh out of school.
Yeah, and it was like the Stro. I mean, Melrose was it in the 90s.
Yeah.
So it was like you'd roll out of bed onto the Melrose, the beer in your hand. It's like, you girls, come on, we're going to my house. It was a party round the clock at my spot. And I'd play it, and everybody would go bonkers. I'm like, this is a hit. I knew it was a hit, but you never think it's going to be, what is it, almost 30 years, and we're still hearing it at stadiums and every bar mitzvah and wedding. And again, that's, Everlast wrote a masterpiece.
Do you still, you don't have to answer them, but you still get residuals? I mean, do you still get...
Everlast and Muggs do, they wrote it.
Oh, yeah. But you did all the merch though, right?
Right, so I made probably more than all of them at first because the merch was a massive deal. We got a $1.2 million merch deal. They front loaded $800,000 to me. And our first record deal was $100,000. We had to make the record for like 60. So we had what was left over between 4 people. But the merch, it's in advance on sales. So we got a $1.2 million t-shirt deal. Yeah, I was driving. Yeah,
And you
nice
still
cars.
and you still do like logos and stuff like in
I
design
always
works?
sold. Yes, I always did. I walked myself into a hip hop career through branding. I worked at a record store. I easily understood end caps and placement and logos, and it was always a fascination. In 7th grade, a friend of mine used to come to school every day in a new band shirt, and I'm like, dude, you're going to all these concerts? Where are you getting all these shirts? He was like, one day it would be like Madness, next day it was The Who, then it was like, and he's like, no, my dad's a silk screener. I was like, a what? He's like, a silk screener. I'm thinking like silk and screen, what? He's like, come over after school, we'll go over, these are blems. I don't know what he's talking about. So we get to his dad's silk screening spot. For those who don't know, it's how you print t-shirts. And there's a big bin of like ones that the registration marks were off. And this is when this was no computer error. This was cutting it by hand. And there was a ton of shirts that some of them had like 2 concerts from 2 different nights because they were just testing. But what's cooler in 7th grade than getting like,
Dude, that's amazing.
corrosion of conformity on one side and Sisters of Mercy on the other. Like that didn't even happen, but I got a shirt that says it did in 2 different nights. Yeah. And so we was like, all of a sudden I'm like, I'm gonna be a silk screener. And so I drew a lot. That's what was the fascination with hip hop, was the graffiti element, the breakdancing element. I liked all of those things. So I always knew that, I could do a lot. I'm a dreamer, and I always come up with logos and concepts, and then I find the rest of the people who can make the dream become reality. The first time doing it massively, obviously, and I didn't do it. It's like, I'm not taking anything away from Everlast. Everlast is an incredible musician, writer, talent, no doubt about it. Muggs, same. Lethal, same. But I had a part 2, and that part was missing from them prior. You know what I mean? And Cypress had it as well. They had been in other groups where it didn't click, but the logo with the right photographer, with the aesthetics that they had, and the sound for that time was revolutionary. And so we were all doing, all the plans were aligning for both groups at that time. So for touring, that was a natural thing. We were basically, a brother group. You know what I mean? It was Muggs produced both records and signed both records. And so an incredible time in hip hop, because hip hop was starting to like die. I mean, it was like come out of the De La Soul era, what I mean? It was starting to fizzle, and here comes grunge, and it's starting to take over, and Alice in Chains and Nirvana and Smashing Pumpkins, and
you guys came out the perfect time.
For you, I wish you would have come out in the 80s.
Oh, for me, it was perfect.
For me too. I'm just being, But so you understand, and so all of a sudden here comes this East Coast sounding hip hop from the West Coast with completely different, no other white boys looked like that at the time. And keep in mind, I'm the #1 Beastie Boy fan on the planet at this point.
Love Beastie Boys.
I mean, they're the reason why. That was the first tour we ever went in, and we got kicked off that tour 6 shows in.
What tour was that?
The Check Your Head tour. We got thrown off that tour.
Oh, how did you get thrown off that tour?
I'm gonna tell you. Come closer. Come here. Let me come into my office. No, I'm sorry.
Yeah.
So we
Put my hand on you.
Hey, enjoy. It's your hour. Make good with it.
I think we should do every interview like this. By the way.
We should
I
do.
like
Come
the,
on.
Yeah.
So
It's nice.
it's nice. How did that happen? Isn't nice?
Isn't nice.
So Beastie Boys moved to LA. They start to do Extra Large, which is their clothing spot. I guess they're working on Check Your Head. They actually came, I guess, for Paul's Boutique. That's true. They did.
That's
it's a masterpiece. But listen, we're gonna have to do like a
Part
10
2.
episodes, because I worked at the record store when that record came out. Most of the people that were Beastie Boy fans, which were like every of my friends, they didn't like the record.
Yeah, they were used to License
panned the
Ill,
record.
right? They
But
wanted
everybody
part 2.
wanted part 2, and I did too. And it took a second, and I just found, speaking of photos that we will talk about, I went digging for photos after Kid 90, and also because of the COVID and because of non-fungible tokens, I'm digging in my archives, and I found some photos of me with all of this stuff. I took all the stuff that you would get for a record store and put on the wall, all the 8x10, and the whatever they're called. They were like fake album skins.
Yeah.
I have posters, circular posters. I have a lot of Beastie Boy stuff. I actually gave a bunch of it away recently, but Beastie Boys were everything to me. So to tell you that to get kicked off that tour was heartbreaking would be an understatement. I was shocked, and I thought we would
happened?
never. A few different things happened. We were like on fire, and they were putting us on like if the gates open or the doors open at 8 o'clock, they were putting on us on like 7:45, and we only did like a 15-20 minute show because it was us, L7, and the Beastie Boys.
Wow, crazy
and
lineup.
When you're the opener, you don't get an hour show. You don't even get a half-hour show. We got 15 to 20 minutes. So it was medleys. It would be like, half of a song into another half a song, one full song, another half a song, and then jump around. And if they're putting us on at 7:45 and the gates are just starting to open and trickle in, by the time we're hitting our stride, it's an empty, half-empty room. And meanwhile, our single is the biggest single on the planet at this time. Their record, everybody remembers, Check Your Head is like this great big. It wasn't moving as fast up the charts as Jump Around was moving. We just had a single out. The record didn't even come out. That. And so there was like that thing too. We're getting like too big to just be opening at 7:45. And it comes to a head when we get to LA. And my mother's stuck out at the front. My sister's stuck out at the front because the tickets aren't at the door. They're rushing us on stage. Our manager's telling us, don't go on, fuck them. Let them find you. So we stay on our bus. They're not supposed to come. Your bus is legally is your home.
Yeah.
Even like cops got to have like a search warrant to come into your RV. Their road manager come in, started lipping off, and Eric just shoved them right at the bus. He was tumbling out, threatened to, kick his head down the street like a football. So he goes, crying off into the wind.
So it was nothing personal with the band. It's all management.
No, it was all just weird little. We go backstage and a security dude puts his head. Tell my sister she can't come in the VIP room because she's cloned the pass or something. I was like, well, I'm drunk. We start beating up. My mother's jumping on the security. I'm jumping. My brother's jumping on.
Are you hanging out with the actual guys?
Who's guys?
Guys, Mike D.
This is great. This is you're like the Dr. Drew of. You're like I'm bringing up all, bro. We got. This is just Danny's.
Awesome.
As Danny,
As
Danny remembers. There was probably I don't know, and I don't ever speak for anybody. But if I'm a guessing man and knowing what I know, I don't think that Everlast was a big Beastie Boys fan. Let's just say that, okay? I was. And maybe Lethal wasn't the biggest Beastie Boy fan. I was obsessed. So when we first got the gig, I couldn't believe it. Like it's all too surreal. We get out there and it's in Kansas City, I believe, the first show. Yeah. And we get from the airport to the arena. The buses are all waiting for us. And we get backstage and I'm like, where's the room? Where's the room? Yeah. I'm like, hey guys, and they're like, whoa. And I already broke protocol by just going into their dressing room, unannounced. I just thought we're new best friends now, right? Like these are our best, and they're like, hey, good to see you. And they're kind of like looking at me like, why are you in our room? And I'm not getting the memo. I'm just like,
and they knew who you were though.
Yeah,
right?
They fucking hired us.
Yeah.
We're not the biggest band, but we're like the up and coming thing. Yeah, they hired us. But it's like I understand now. Like anybody comes in the room, it's like almost like extended family walk in. I'm like, I'll meet you at the same. Yeah. This is our like sacred zone. So I'm probably popping their beers. What's up? Oh, yo, dog, and they're just like, what the. And it just was like spiraling from there. I bought my first AK-47 on that tour in Dallas. You could just kind of, and it was bad. You know what I mean? Jeez. We were just too much. We were licensed to ill, like on that videotape, home videotape. In real life, when that wasn't what they were doing, they were all into the Dalai Lama. And
so when you guys had that little altercation on the bus, that was
the straw that broke the camel's back. The crew said that we're going to quit if this band doesn't get fired. So the weird part is we go to San Jose and play another show with them, and it's awkward and nobody's saying anything. And we're in the eating at the tables, and they're like at the other side of the room, and there's like notable distance. And then we drive from there all the way up to Canada. I guess it would be Vancouver because it's the West Coast. And we get to Canada, and it was a long drive, dude. And as we get there finally, it was like an 11-hour drive if I remember, but maybe not, I don't know. And we get to this hotel, and it's the longest escalator known to man. And we're coming up, I just get off the tour bus, I grab my stuff, and I'm coming up, and as I'm coming up, I see MCA coming down, and he's like, what the fuck? I see him visibly saying, really? What the fuck? And he's like, dude, what are you doing here? I'm like, what? He's like, now we're passing, he's like, bro, you better call your manager. I'm like, what? As I got to the top of the steps, our road manager goes, I just talked to Amanda Demi, we've been fired.
No
So
way.
We got fired like 2 shows before. I just guess the message took a long time to get to us.
So you drove 11 hours
to Canada. And on that way back to California, that whole way, I'm like, this is over. It's over. We're never working again. We just got fired from the Beastie Boy tour. Our careers are over. I think a month later we went on the biggest selling, sold out every venue. Us and Cypress Hill, Soul Assassins. But in that moment, life is ending. I'm just going to throw myself off the tour bus. and you know,
That's
I was
perfect.
just crying my way all the way back to California, kind of.
Could you still, like, after all this happened, were you still a Beastie Boys fan even? I mean,
No, right away, no. You clearly don't know who you're dealing with. I'm thinking, how can I, no. No, of course not. It's like, you know, it's like, you know, the girl you love telling you, you know, you're done. With a little
but it's more
maturity
their
and a little
manager,
growth.
though. Their management is the...
No. I mean, listen, your manager does the axe work for your band. I mean, it doesn't work the other way.
I need to get a manager.
I am always going to be a Beastie Boy fan, and I'll always love the first two records in particular. After even to Check Your Head for me, and this is dead honest, I would never tell you something just for the fact of, it was getting into the realm of like, and there's songs on it, I mean, like, Sabotage is, I mean, that's after. I'm thinking of Gratitude.
Yeah,
no, what's the one where he's like, can't stand? No, what's the one with the guitar with the Ad Rock is killing it, the solo like.
Oh man, I love this.
Listen, every album.
I love this album.
Every Beastie Boy album has something I love on it.
Yes.
But the dream
Pass
of
the
like,
mic, Gratitude, So What You Want.
It's the one where they play with the.
This is what we need, like Howard Stern as the assistant, like just throws it out there, like, yeah, this is what you're thinking about.
Anyway, the answer to your question is no. At the time, I was not a fan. I was jaded. I was like, you broke my heart. That being said, I think I ran into Ad Rock a couple weeks later at a club in LA, and I definitely gave him mushrooms because I was definitely doing mushrooms. He definitely accepted them and then disappeared. I always loved Ad Rock. If there was a Beastie Boy I wanted to be like, when I'm a kid growing up with Kiss, I wanted to be Ace Frehley. When I seen the Beasties, I want to be Ad Rock. And I also remember doing our first sound check, you know, for the first show we were doing with them, and me being out there, and then them in the balconies, the Beastie Boys, watching us do that was the most awkward moment I've ever had on stage. Because in my mind, most of the stuff that I do, movement-wise, it's like Ad Rock-esque. And I'm like, he's watching me from up there, and I'm like, dude, he's just gonna laugh. He's like, dude, this guy's biting my whole, because that was like the guy. Like that was the guy molded. Yeah, that was my influence. I've heard it before, and not compare myself to any of these greats, but I remember it being like refreshing when I heard Steve Jones from the Sex Pistols say that, like, and now as soon as I said it, I forget the other guy's name. It was a guitar, the Johnny Thunders guy. That Johnny Thunders used to do a thing, and he's like, I don't even know why I copied him because I had my own thing, but I just used to do this thing that he used to do. And looking back, it gives me, you know, and the way I moved was like how Ad Rock moved, because that was to me the quintessential B-boy. That I wanted to be like, so it was super awkward. All of that means nothing today, except for, you know, it's a funny story. Getting kicked off the Beastie tour is the badge of honor that you couldn't buy. I mean, who gets kicked off a Beastie Boy tour? We did. House of Pain did. So that's fantastic. Career was just beginning.
They got kicked off the Madonna tour, by the way.
They did, yeah, but that was because nobody. Yeah, but that was because they. I don't think. Well, maybe I don't know. I think that just because the fans weren't getting what they were, what they were doing, but maybe a little bit of both. The truth is that these are experiences that I look back on, and they're priceless to me. I mean, as we're talking about them almost 30 years later, that's incredible that, you know, that those are still things. But at the time, when these things are happening in real time, it's like, dude, this is terrible for everybody. This is not good. And it turns out to be just fine. And you know, rest in peace, MCA.
MCA, yeah, that was...
Ricky Powell, rest in peace. He was on that tour as well. And you know, life is fleeting and life is short, and good, bad, or indifferent, man. To just be sitting here at this point of it, it's all, you know, it's all bonus rounds, and for me, I'm grateful for all of it, even the bad stuff, because it's changed me and it's made me who I am today. And for the first time, and I'm not just being, you know, cheeky or whatever, I can honestly say that I like the guy. When I look in the mirror, I like what I see, and when I go to bed at night, I sleep with a clear conscience, because I don't. My side of the street is clean, and you know, I'm not the guy I was, and it's not to say I didn't do the things that I've done in the past, but I'm not that guy anymore. And so that's for me a 180. And so all of this now is like novel. It's almost like I'm watching a movie 20 years ago, and you watched that movie from a different, you know, and we're remembering scenes, and I'm like, is that my movie? I was in that? Like, because it doesn't seem sometimes like a movie. It feels like a movie we watched together, not my life.
Yeah, but you lived it.
We lived it. And so to get back to going on tours with bands that we both love and adore, you got to keep in mind, even in early '90s, there was like an unspoken like ban on rap shows because a lot of people there was a lot of it would bring African American communities into predominantly white communities, and that was at a time even in the '90s was still like ooh, like we don't want that kind of trouble. And then there was a lot of there was it seemed like every big show was Run DMC and Together Forever. Somebody got shot in the parking lot, or Mike Tyson knocked some dude out in another. There was always reports somebody got shot, somebody got stabbed. So city council was like, you're not bringing any of that to town. So when we came out, we kind of like, we qualified as the hip hop group, but we cloaked it as like, hey, we love this grunge thing too. We love rock. We're open-minded to that, but you're not really seeing a hip hop show. We're not booking that as we're kind of just like alternative.
Yeah.
And it was a way,
Did you guys go on the Warped Tour, by the way? I was just thinking about it.
That was after. That was
okay.
after the fact for sure.
Because they had. Well, I say that because they had so many different acts. Like
this is kind of what encouraged that kind of Judgment Night soundtrack.
Can I say something real fast? I forgot to talk about this with DJ Lethal, and it killed me. But this is one of my all-time favorite soundtracks. Most underrated. Right. It's like the birth before nu metal. You have Slayer with Body Count, with Faith No More.
And not just rhyming on somebody else's track. So in the past, when Run DMC rhymed on Aerosmith's track, these were already hits. It was a hit track that he was rhyming on. This is the first time two bands were creating together unique music in that. And that's Ricky Rackman's sister, Karen Rackman, who was
Ricky
part
was
of
on
that.
I didn't even talk about that. That's amazing.
So Ricky would tell you a lot about it. But also, I think
the
Be Real and Everlast
yeah.
also were the catalyst for saying, like, we're not trying to rhyme. We're not going to rhyme on nobody else's like track that's already, we're not going to rhyme on we're going to make new material, or we're not going to do this. And so that was like
this was before I don't know if it's before Rage Against the Machine, but this was what I heard first before any of that stuff. And having you guys did a song with Helmet, right?
Yeah.
That was amazing, man. Yeah. The opening track's probably my favorite song on there, but
me too.
Just rhyming with all these,
it's one of those house-based songs I listen to still, and I still love it.
I love it too, man. What do you think about Judgment Night? That's one of my favorite. The movie.
I've never seen the movie.
Everlast is in the movie.
Yeah, Everlast. He's in the movie, and that's also where he meets Peter Green, which is also a friend that we go way back. So there's a lot of Everlast is in the movie.
The fact that this is not talked about more often, I just don't.
I mean, between heads know. You know what I mean? Like cats are around that. Then if they're like deep cut, you're like a deep cut dude. You're like a liner note junkie. What I like. I
love it.
Because when I worked at the record store too, I was always like, who produced that? What studio did they master that at? It was information nobody else cared about. But I always wanted to know like the details.
Dude, I was so when I was a kid, man. I used to with cassette tapes. I'd lay them all out. I'd sit there and go through them all, man. That was just my favorite thing.
Well, I was a product manager at the record store, so they paid me to do that. Really? To categorize them, price them, queue them in, put them out on the floor, and I loved it. I worked at a record store at a time where hip hop they had no section. Hip hop would go in the R&B section, and reggae would be in the international music section, and bands like Fishbone and 24/7 Spies, and particularly 24/7 Spies, had to put a sticker on the record saying, this is a rock record. Because of the dreads and the silhouettes, these were mistakenly put in international or reggae categories or in R&B categories. They didn't know what to do with it. They didn't. I stole off the floor, and I say stole in a nice way. We were able to go out on the floor and promo anything. Celtic Frost was a band. I'm like, this sounds like a cool Irish band. I'm gonna check that out. And I was, whoa, what the? It was not an Irish band by any means. I don't know if you know who that band is,
I've heard it,
Celtic Frost is some serious heavy metal. Some serious metal. But I thought, hey, if it might be an Irish band, at the time, even when I was trying to make some Irish hip hop. So I was like, this is gonna be But my musical IQ and movie IQ went through the roof working at a record store because, again, as a product manager, I could go out on the floor and promo an album, meaning open it and then put it over you play it in the store or behind in our area where we did because it wasn't the store wouldn't hear it.
I've worked at I love it.
And then the movies we could rent 3 a night, and as long as they weren't top hits on the weekend, we couldn't do it was number 1 hit. There was 10 movies you couldn't rent from Friday till Sunday because that was their bread and butter.
I worked at a music store too, man. We did the same thing.
So I rented 1,000 movies I didn't want to see, but then I'm like, oh, that's awesome. I would have never, if I didn't have the ability to take it home for free or next to nothing. There's a huge discount on it.
This is a good. So did this help you with the whole '80s? Because you love Breakfast Club. Outsiders, obviously. Was that what it was when you got to rent these movies? You
know what it was? No, because I saw those movies in the original release. For me, all of that 80s, people go, you're such a movie and cultural. I'm like, dude, it's yes and no. So It's very finite. It's very 1976. Let's start at the Bad News Bears and let's end at like the Breakfast Club type, coming of age John Hughes movies. And this is a sacred time because it's also like my new wave era and my mod ska era and all that. This is before the Big Hurt. You know what I mean? This is before like that, whatever your thing is where you're like, oh, life is really like, it could be very sharp and painful.
Yes,
in
man.
other areas.
Yeah.
So
You're more innocent back then.
Oh yeah.
Life hasn't happened yet.
The axe hasn't,
John Hughes is great for that.
So I go to those as like the warm fuzzy blanket, and they've always been there for me. In particular, we were talking earlier, the gentleman who I'm looking at now, who's a Chris Penn stand-in.
Oh yeah,
R.I.P.
Ryan looks like Chris Penn.
Yeah, Ryan said, "Hey man, the music I play is all over the place." I said, I think nowadays this is a common thing, but in the past, if you would have found my iPod or whatever, you would have been like, "This is not Danny's," because it's Susie and the Banshees and the Cocktail Twins and Sisters of Mercy and hip hop. That wasn't a common, and I was always that way. I was always into the. Equally as I was in hip hop,
Yeah, I always wonder like people that just listen to metal, it's like I just listen to this or I just listen to hip hop.
If that's so like linear, I would get bored. I want to hang myself. I really would, and that's what I love. And there's genres I just don't like, and country's one of them, and I hate to say that. I live in the heartland now, and people are like, you don't like country? I'm like, with exception,
Do you
like
not like
outlaw
any country?
Yeah, I mean like Willie Nelson and
That's
Johnny
what I
Cash,
like,
but that's not country.
But you don't like pop country.
But I do like Chris Stapleton, so that's a whole,
his voices.
I mean, his songwriting and it just, so my mind has always been open to that stuff. I same with anything as far as new experiences. I encourage them and look forward to them. My art appreciation is all over the place, from graffiti to fine art. I mean, and my movies are all over the place. But I'll always have a sweet spot for that '80s coming of age, because that's the years we came to age. So Fast Times at Ridgemont High, Valley Girl, Bad News Bears I was right at that age with the Kelly Leak character and all of that cool stuff that he was doing, and I love all the John Hughes movies, and then. In the 90s, there was a lot of stuff that I liked. Early 90s, where it was like The Professional or Leon, if it's the, State of Grace with, Irish Mob and Hell's Kitchen. There was a lot of filmmakers.
What do you think about that movie Kids? Because I was big on the
It was past,
Kid 90.
so yeah, that was Soleil's era. So Soleil's younger than me, and that was like I was already too official. And again, the Kids is an official movie, but not when you're 5 years out of that frame. It's kind of like, and people say this, and you touched on The Outsiders, and we will definitely do a deep dive on that for you. But when I saw The Outsiders, it changed my life. I grew up, again, as a latchkey kid. Nobody was there for me. And I see for the first time in my life what like life could be for a guy like me if I could just find a few dudes to run around with that had my best interests and me having theirs. That is basically how gangs get started. That's how motorcycle clubs get started. That's how graffiti crews, breakdancing crews. Sometimes that's sports teams get started, but I wasn't thinking, collegiately. I was thinking like streetwise stuff. And I thought, if this is the best life ever gets, you run around the streets with dudes like Dallas Winston and Johnny Cade, it's not that bad. We'll sneak into movies, we'll you know what I mean?
Yeah.
We'll do our little thing, and I can live with that. And so I've carried that with me. It's obviously one of my favorite movies of all time. Never in a million years did I think we would be talking about it now, or that I would be, the owner of the house from the movie and have the world's largest collection of Outsiders movie, book, and
so
other memorabilia.
Yeah,
I want to just say, no, because I'll forget what I was trying to tell you. And when I tell other people that I work with now that are like 5 years older than me, I'm 52, and they're like, I'm like, so The Outsiders are like, Dan, you got to understand. Duff McKagan, here's a perfect example.
Okay, good. Yeah, let's hear it.
So Duff comes and plays the BOK Center. I live right across the street. That's the Bank of Oklahoma Center. It is equal to Staples Center or Barclays in New York or whatever you have in Atlanta. That's your tier 1 arena.
Yeah.
So Guns N' Roses is playing, and I'm friends with Duff. He's Irish, I'm Irish.
That's amazing.
Okay, so call Duff. He's like, dude, I'm in this amazing hotel called the Topeka. The Topeka? Topeka? That's a coffee house. Wait, we have a Topeka in our lobby. Dude, you're in my lobby. I'll be right down. I live at the top floor at the Mayo. So I come down.
No way.
Duff's in there getting coffee. He's like, dude, what are you doing? I go, so I want to bring you to the Outsiders house. I seen you just come from the Christmas Story house too. He goes, oh, it was killer.
I go, I want to see that.
It's killer. But I said, no, dude, I got the house from the Outsiders. He's like, oh, cool. Well, I'm going to go work out at the arena right now. They have a gym down there, and then I have a few press things that I got to do, but I'll call you in a few. Cool. So I run to the Outsiders house. I start working on stuff, getting it set up. At the time, we weren't even close to being open. Most of the collection wasn't in there. And around 3 o'clock, he calls. He's like, "Hey, buddy, listen, I got you set up for tonight. You're good. How many tickets you need? Come to the VIP thing, blah, blah, blah." He's like, "But I won't be able to make it." I'm like, "Oh, that's okay, dude. It's cool." You know, I'm like, it's like, he goes, "Bro, I've got to be honest with you." He goes, "You know, I was 22 when that movie came out. I was already doing like rails of coke off the toilets at CBGB's or, you know, something like that, you know?"
Yeah.
And it put everything into perspective real quickly. And I was like, "Oh, no, I get it, dude. I get it." I'm like, you know, but it's more than that. It's a really cool book that S.E. Hinton, he goes, "No, dude, I've read the book. My daughters are reading the book right now. They were actually in a play,
No way.
The Outsiders play too. I love the legacy and I love it, but I haven't seen the movie. I'm going to watch the movie with my family. That way, the next time we come back, we are going to come to your museum." I just didn't want to ruin the experience. But it finally puts them like, "Okay, dude, I was 13 when the movie came out. If you were 16 when that movie came out, you might go, hey, it's cool, but it's a little, I don't want to say corny, but it was just a little, it was made for like 7th and 8th graders in that era of like, you know, and I'm not saying 20-year-olds don't like it. But even when I tell people who say they haven't seen The Outsiders now, I'm like, watch it with, you know, juvenile eyes and realize that
that's
this
such a
is
good point. Yeah.
right. And a lot of people also say, listen, Outsiders was cool. I love Rumblefish. I was a little bit older, and Rumblefish was a little bit more visceral and serious movie,
Yeah.
a little more artsy, and it's fair play. I did not like Rumblefish, which is another S.E. Hinton book, the author of The Outsiders, and it was another Coppola movie that he adapted. And right after he did The Outsiders, he filmed that.
Oh, yeah.
I fell in love with
cool.
it later because I live in Tulsa, and it's S.E. Hinton. So now I have I have a nice sized collection of Rumblefish stuff. But you get where I'm going. It's like
Yeah,
there's an
seriously,
age
that's
gap.
cool.
I love Fast Times at Ridgemont High. My younger sister might have thought Clueless was the bomb. I had
Yes.
never seen Clueless.
That was
You know
more
what I
my
mean?
time. I was
Okay, but you understand it's relevant to,
Yeah.
you know, and I think movies has a way of doing that in a way that music kind of transcends that. You know, I was just
Wow,
somewhere
good
when
point.
Journey was playing, and I was like, everybody loves like, "Just this all time now," and that song's got to be 45 years old now, but kids know it.
Yeah.
But kids don't know movies from 45 years ago.
That's so true.
So movies have a different shelf life, or they connect with the audience, I think, and then the audience grows with it and brings it
Yes.
with. Music can just kind of
It's spanned.
time,
Oh,
and
you're
space,
so
and
right,
stuff
man.
like
There's so
that.
many actors and actresses from like the 60s and 70s that we have
You're
no
like,
clue about.
No,
Yeah,
of
it's
course. And when
decade
we were
later.
like still shitting in our diapers, they were at the Polo Lounge having, you know, coffee with Marlon Brando, and you're like, oh, yeah.
All right, man. So I got to talk about The Outsiders, and we got to wrap this up. But so you found the house for sale, right? And you got a kind of a sweet deal on it. Is that the?
Yeah, that's the elevator pitch. What happened was, so House of Pain was done by the late 90s. I go on like a decade-long tear of drugs, alcohol, and nothingness. In 2000, I get sober. I make that solo record. The record doesn't come out. 3 years into my sobriety, I decide I didn't have a drug. I have a drug problem. I don't have a drinking problem. I can go back to drinking, you know? So I tried to drink, and it didn't work for me. And if I can clear this.
No, you're good. You can take a sip of water, man.
The flight. So what happens is I get sober again, and prior to getting sober, Lethal had a deal with Geffen. He had a label deal. He was looking for acts. I had 2 acts. Lethal had 1 act. All 3 of these acts were white kids that could rap, and at a level of like I had yet to be heard before. This is like right after Eminem had kind of like just popped, but they were at that. And you know, everybody's gonna probably roll their eyes. Slane is like, I put him up there with that. This other kid, now his name is gonna. Anyway, we had 3 people. And we're like, why make a record of 3 people when we could just make one cool group? And so we started making a record with the 3 of them together, and they were working really well together.
Yeah.
And then they were like, Danny, why don't you join the group and do the logos and like kind of
Yeah,
hype
man.
man? And I'm like, you know, I'm like, all right, I'm gonna do that. And now there's 4 of us plus Lethal, that's 5. But it was still missing something. It had a bunch of like dudes that were up and coming, but it didn't have like the anchor. And so I was like, I just met Ill Bill. Just met Ill Bill from Nonfiction, had been a fan of Nonfiction's work. And I said, and Nonfiction had just broken up. I said, Bill, would you come and do a track with us? And he's like, yeah, no doubt. And then when I started talking, I was like, man, we really need you in this group. I wish you would like spearhead this thing, because like I'm not a MC in that way. I'm like I'm the guy who gets everybody in the room and to the table and makes the concept. But he's like, yeah, no, I'm down with that. I'm down. He's liking that because it's like his group had just broken up. I hadn't been on in a group in a long time.
Yeah.
And then out of the blue, Everlast hits me up on MySpace and was like, yo, I see you guys are doing some shit. I hadn't talked to everybody. That's almost a decade.
Dude, everybody uses social media to hit you
I
up.
know.
Man.
I'm like,
you got
yo,
Instagram,
what the?
MySpace.
So I was like, yeah, you can rhyme. You can make a track with us. He goes, nah, I want to get in the group. I was shocked. So I was like, yo. So long story longer, we put the group together. It took a while to get that record to come in the first record. You know.
Yeah, I got it right here.
Oh yeah, we got another copy right here.
And we got you hold yours all mine.
Lethal's,
See?
I'm saying Lethal's is also who signed it.
That's
for you?
official, man.
Oh yeah.
Oh.
So we go on our first tour, and that tour brings me to Tulsa, Oklahoma. And in Tulsa, Oklahoma, I realized it was familiar to me, yet I had never been there. I'm like, why is this so familiar? What's going on here? And I was like, Tulsa, holy shit, I think The Outsiders was filmed here. I think she wrote the book about this. And so I go looking for locations. And in looking for locations, I end up finding the drive-in from the movie, the park from the movie where Johnny stabs the Soch. And by finding the park, I knew that the house was in that vicinity, and I found the house. At the time, the house was like in really bad shape. It was for sale for $42,000. $42,000 in 2009 was still a lot of money, but for a house, like, you can't buy anything in LA for $42,000 with the word real attached to it, much less real estate. So I'm like, you're telling me that the house from The Outsiders is not only for sale, but is for sale for 42 grand. And I was like, oh my God. But I didn't want to bite off more than I can chew. Okay. I was smart enough and just sober enough. I had like 4 or 5 years sobriety. I was like, dude, this is going to get you in trouble. You know nothing about, you've never been to Oklahoma in your life. Just leave it alone. So what I do, I took a photo in front of it. We played Kane's Ballroom. The guy said, hey, your buddy Steve Jones and his boys punched a hole in our wall in '78 before they left. So the Sex Pistols played Kane's Ballroom. They punched a hole, Sid Vicious punched a hole in the green room on his way out. They cut the green room wall out and put it in the office years later. Yeah, they still have it.
Cool.
So go looking for locations. I find the drive-in. I find the park from the movie where Johnny stabs the Soch. All of this stuff, meanwhile, looks just like it did in the movie, which coming from LA, nothing stays the same. The property is too valuable for anything to be sacred, so we tear and rebuild everything. So to be able to walk around Tulsa, Oklahoma in 2009, sober as a judge, highly caffeinated, and had this new thing called a BlackBerry phone and the internet to publish these photos. So I published that day the locations from The Outsiders, and including me in front of The Outsiders' house, and the hole that Sid Vicious allegedly punched in the wall as he was leaving.
That's so cool you do this.
The second to last gig that the Sex Pistols had ever played. And my phone would not stop shaking that whole tour because everybody was like, oh my God, where on the Warner Brothers lot is The Outsiders' house located? I've worked on that lot before. I didn't know there was still. I'm like, dude, it's not on the lot. It's in Tulsa, Oklahoma. And everybody's like, oh my God, the Sex Pistols. You know, so that was like a big deal. So in that moment, I realized that I was onto something. And I thought, I'm going to use this tour bus. I hadn't been on tour in a decade. It has been since like the late House of Pain days that I was on tour. So I was very happy to be on the road. And two, it was at a very unique time in history where there was like first time ever internet on a tour bus. 2 things in your pocket. I still had a flip phone, a Razor, and I had a BlackBerry, and you could actually kind of go on the internet with that and then take photos and look up. So I started doing
on the bus.
I started doing this thing. I started doing urban exploring, and I create this little thing, this Delta Bravo thing. And what I do is I take historic photos. And then I go out, and if I'm in Minneapolis, where was the Mary Tyler Moore show filmed? And then I'll find her apartment, and then I'll take the screen grab of it, and I'll take the apartment now. I'll mash them together, and then I'll put up the information, and I put that online. And I find that for any kind of pop culture, true crime, LL Cool J's second record, Bad, where he's leaning on a Jaguar.
Yes.
At St. Albans, Queens, it's a school. I go to his school. I go wait till it's nighttime. I take the exact same photo. I put the before and after.
Wait till it's nighttime, get the album.
Time, what year it came out, who took the photo,
Dude,
Glenn
so
Friedman,
cool.
You know, any notes I know
You
about it.
did that for the Breakfast Club too, right? Like,
I've done it for 100 movies and 1,000 music locations. And I have a whole crew of people who do it. It all starts by finding The Outsiders' house. So for 5 years of doing it, I got pitched from everybody from the guy who does Shark Tank and Survivor, all the way down to mom and pop video crews that wanted to make a TV show of what I did. It never comes into a TV show.
I wish it would though.
Well, hence the like doing this, you know.
It's like Mark Cuban behind that, you know.
Well, it never turns out to be that, but what it does do is it keeps bringing me back to Tulsa. And so finally I'm like, why doesn't somebody do something with this house? Well, after asking that 1,000 times, I go, that inner voice goes, dude, why don't you do something about it? And I was like, you know, I don't know the first thing about doing anything about anything. Like, I'm just trying to chill, you know.
Right.
At the time, I had 28 grand on my name, and I just couldn't imagine the world without the house. And I get that sneaking suspicion that it wasn't going to last, because every time I would come, so for 5 years, I would make it somehow twice a year to Tulsa, whether passing through to Graceland, passing through to Nashville, passing through to wherever. And I would always make a beeline for this place. And I realized that this thing might not last if someone doesn't save it. So that's at year 5 when I finally finagle and get the tenants who are living there to give up the phone number of the owner. She's absentee as a landlord. She had lost control of the house. She hadn't been paid rent in 8 months. Mm-hmm. My buddy calls and says, listen, we know it's not on the market. We know it was on the market for 42 grand. If you ever think of selling it, we would love to hear what you were thinking for it. And she said, I won't take a penny less than 20 grand. He said, man, with all due respect, I've seen that house. I wouldn't pay you a penny less, more than 15 grand. To which she said, agreed. I end up buying for 15 grand. I pay 5,000 to move out the tenants so that they don't pull out all the, or scorch earth on the way out.
Wow, that's a good, yeah.
And now I have 8 grand in my name, no work in front of me, and I own the coolest greaser fort known to man in Tulsa, Oklahoma.
You bought it sight unseen though, right?
Sight unseen.
Yeah.
I drive out there. They did not leave me cash for keys. I break into my own house, and when I got in there, I realized that I had not only made the stupidest mistake that I ever did, I just flushed $20,000 down the toilet. It was a complete teardown. It was a trap house. It was cat shit, bad shit, rat shit, you name it. It was fucked. And one, I know nothing. I know fuck all about fixing things.
Yeah.
I'm good at breaking them, fixing not so much. I have no more money left.
Yeah.
But I did have a passion for the outsiders, a newfound love for Tulsa. I knew this house was sacred to people. I just didn't know where those people were. I thought maybe I'm the only one who feels this way. I can't be the only one who feels this way. And I also was like, listen, I'm gonna have to ask for help, and that's not easy for me, 6'6" alpha male, like, I need help, guys. I don't know how to do drywall. I don't know. Like, man the fuck up, like, learn something. And I learned a lot in the last 3.5 years, and some of it is technical skills, and some of it is just, not being embarrassed to ask for help.
Yeah.
I started GoFundMe, and then all of a sudden the money starts rolling in. I'm like, oh my God. And the fans come out of the woodwork, the press comes out of the woodwork, and starts to just snowball.
Yeah.
Year 1, we raised about $40,000, and then it kind of just falls off a cliff. At that time, everybody was doing GoFundMe. I mean, every other thing on your feed was GoFundMe, GoFundMe, GoFundMe. So people got bored of doing that. People also got skeptical about it. There was a lot of rough times at that house. All that house needed was a completely new house, and it would have been fine. So I had to start from scratch. I knew nothing. So I had to keep meeting people who say, hey, that the foundation is screwed. You have to start over. There is no cement under here. There's car jacks and bricks under here, and you need to fix that first before you work on the drywall or I was trying to go up I was just doing it all wrong. So again, I just kept asking for help, and the help kept showing up. And slowly but surely, I figured a way to find the right people to get it done. And that's my strong suit is finding something that I believe in, finding other people who also have the same passion I do for saving these things, and then getting it done.
When you're rebuilding the house, I mean, what original is left of the house? I mean,
So it was the actual house. Unlike, so this is also funny and ironic at the same time. The Christmas Story house, the guy who bought it, also bought it sight unseen. And the dilemma he had was that they filmed most of it on a soundstage in Toronto.
Oh.
They only used the fragile
package.
Stairway? Or, They used the back of the Black Bart scene, I think.
Yes, yeah.
And they used the front door when they were delivering the box that wouldn't fit in the door.
That's it?
The kitchen, all that was on a soundstage. So he said, Danny, I cried twice the day I bought that house. I said, let's hear it. He said, one, when I got to Cleveland, I realized I just bought Ralphie's house. Second cry was when I opened the door and I realized I was screwed, that the kitchen was supposed to be on the right side, it was on the left side, and the bathroom where it was supposed to be was up there. There was no second story. It was just completely different. Or there was a second story, but nothing was anatomically
that's
correct.
That's a big part, man.
And he said, I had to close the door, go home and beg, borrow, and steal $250,000. I said, well, must be nice. Finding $250 was going to be tough for me. 250 was doing the impossible. So the project sputtered for a while there. We were still doing the little work that needed to be done, but I was still $30,000 off after 2.5 years of working on this thing. And then Jack White came to town, and he had bought a house in Tulsa. He was in the newspaper the week before, championing his new, love for Tulsa and his love for Essie Hinton and her work. And so the people who own the BOK Center, they made a concert with Jack. He played the baseball field. He has a thing for baseball, and he has a bat company as well. And they said,
cool.
Danny, he's a big fan of S.E. Hinton's. Would you get us an autographed book? And I'm like, what am I, the fucking bellboy? Like, get him a book. I'm thinking, fuck that motherfucker. I love, but just let me, this is, like,
really
again,
feel
it's
about
ego,
that.
right? It's like, I love White Stripes. I love Jack White, but I'm like, what do I look like? That's my first reaction. And I
At least
don't
you're
mind
honest.
telling myself
Yeah.
because my first reaction is like this ego bullshit. And then the second was, of course I'll get that for you. So I went and got a book. I said, S.E. Hinton, I said, Susie, this guy Jack White, he's a big deal. He's playing the thing. He wants the book. She goes, I never heard of him. I said, well, he heard of you, and he just give you high praise in the newspaper. She says, well, I love him already. I said, he's a good dude. So I bring him the book. They say, hey, you want to meet Jack? I was like, sure, why not? Go in the backstage. He jumps right up. Yo, what's going on? No big league bullshit. No ego shit. Sweetheart of a dude.
Oh, that's good to
Flick
hear.
it up. Give him the S.E. Hinton rules shit. Give him the book. He's like, Dan, I would really like to see the house tomorrow. You be around? I'm like, yeah. I thought, all right, whatever. Maybe it shows, maybe it doesn't. Run into him. He's like, I'm going to go buy some used guitars at the spot. I'm going to look at these rare guitars, and then I'll be over in an hour. He came by in an hour, looked at the whole thing. He goes, I love what you're doing here. Why isn't it done? I said, well, we're 30,000 shy. And I had just crunched the numbers that week. It had been a while since I'd crunched the numbers. I was just like getting overwhelmed by the whole thing. And he said, what was 30 grand by you? And I told him I had my punch list. And he goes, no, it sounds like you know what you're talking about. And I appreciate it. He goes, dude, I'm going to give you 30 from last night's show.
No way.
And we almost fainted. And the whole room was a collective gasp of like, oh, like case dismissed or guilty. It was like, oh, you could hear it. It was palpable. And I want to tell you that 2 minutes after he left, my phone was like, hey, this is the accountant for Jack White. Where do you want that?
Oh, it was immediate.
It was no chasing him, no fucking around, no nothing. So Jack White is really the reason we get the ball, to score.
Oh, dude, that's so
him.
good.
A couple months later, Billy Idol comes to town, and I love Billy Idol as much as I love the Beastie Boys back in the day. I had blonde hair in the early House of Pain days,
I grew up on
and
that.
we're friends, but not as close friends as as other people I know in that way. So I get invited to go down there, and my buddy Billy Morrison, who plays guitar with them, is like, yo, come say hi to Billy. Billy wants to say hi, mate. And I was like, all right, cool. So I go back there. He goes, hey, how you doing, mate? So you live here full time? I go, yeah. He goes, how's the house going? I'm like, he knows about the house? I go, yeah, the house is kind of great. He goes, I heard Jack gave you some money. I go, yeah.
Wow.
He goes, I want to give you some money too. I'm like, you do? He goes, not Jack White money, but I want to give you some money. And I want to tell you, Billy Idol gave me a check. The amount is insignificant. It's very significant, but it's not the number that means something to me.
Yeah.
It's that the 13-year-old in me is like, what the hell just happened? Like Billy Idol gave me a check for the outside. So the people who have supported this, it starts literally from your everyday neighbors who are like, dude, I apologize that I let my grass get this high. Your grass was this high, all of our grasses. So when you cut your grass, we could tell now that we were, so they started cutting the grass. The neighborhood has a ripple effect. Everybody's house is starting to look good. Their taxes probably doubled on their property taxes, but also their houses are worth twice as much as they were before we got over there doing what we do. So we have an amazing grand opening. I've had the actors. I've had Rob Lowe come on his own to film episodes of his TV show while passing through.
That's cool.
Ralph Macchio has come twice. C. Thomas Howell has been 3 or 4 times already.
Yeah.
That's
Cool. Do you have anybody else from the Outsiders stop by?
Yeah, I mean, we're still waiting on Diane Lane. We're still waiting on Matt Dillon. I talked to Matt. I talked a few different times. The timing was off every time. And he was scheduled to come do a thing, and then COVID happened. And so it was a bigger thing. We were going to do it with the BOK Center, and it got shelved because of COVID. So we got hit by COVID as any business did. We did a grand opening. It was sold out. We made some good money to get the final things done, and then COVID knocked the world down. And so in the last year and change, we've been closed, and we've just been holding on. And now we open on the weekends. So for the last 3 months, we started like 1 month a week. 1 weekend a month. And then it was 2 weekends. Now it's 2 days. We do every weekend.
Slowly getting in there.
Yeah, and some weekends are better than others, but there's hope. And
So when people, you have your like a website that has the hours open.
yeah,
so
right now I can tell you don't even have to look on the website. We're just open on the weekends from 11 a.m. till 4 p.m. We have the world's largest collection. When I bought the house, I had nothing to collect anyway. I had one poster. I was a 40-something-year-old man. Why would I have an Outsiders collection? I mean, it's a kid's movie.
Is that poster up there?
Of
the
course,
original?
it's the first one you walked in the door. We now have the largest collection of Outsiders movie memorabilia, wardrobe, books from all over the planet. It's so much that I've now, this week in Tulsa, I've made a lot of noise press-wise because I've got a few big items that had been
Donated? Is that what
No,
happens?
well, somebody brought the fountain. The guy who built the fountain that Johnny gets stabbed in.
Yeah.
He brought back the original centerpiece, and he's letting us make a casting of it so we
Yeah.
can recreate it. I got a staircase from a 100-year-old building that just got hit by a truck, but it was featured in Rumblefish. So we had to get a big, giant crane, lock down Route 66, literally weld it off the walls or torch it off the walls. Meanwhile, the fire marshals are like, where's your permit for this? Like one
Really?
bolt away, they're like, you just broke down, you just put a crane on Route 66, shut it down, you have no permits. Are there tenants? They were freaking out. And I was like, we're just about done, guys, we're out of here. And I was like, it's been a crazy week. The point is, I'm gonna need a bigger boat. We're gonna need a bigger museum. So eventually, there's no name for it, but I have the collection of all of S.E. Hinton's works are starting to just be too big for, you get it. I mean, I'm looking, I didn't realize you had a museum, but this museum is going to need another
I like you
museum.
call it museum now. I like that.
Your museum's going to need another
It's better
museum.
than basement. Like, come to my museum.
It's not even a man cave.
and do an
It would
interview.
do disrespect to calling it that.
Dude,
You
I'm
have
calling
like
it a museum forever.
It is a museum.
It's not a
Scott's
basement.
Place. But this, you get it. You get to the point where you're like, I'm going to need a little bit more room
Yeah,
for my
yeah,
stuff. And you're
people-
like, what are
yeah.
you talking about? You have the biggest stuff room in the
I mean, I
planet.
got stuff hanging up in closets now. It's ridiculous.
Me too. I'm
Yeah.
telling you. So I found my second calling. I took everything I learned in the music business and I apply it to somebody else's legacy now. And it's not based on my ego or my promoting of my brand. It's actually their brand, their legacy, and I just honor it. And my number one customer are really kids who are reading this book. This book was written by S.C. Hinton, who's a girl. S.C. is Susan Eloise Hinton. She writes it at 15 and a half. She's failing English, gets a D+ in creative writing. The book has never been out of print. 3 years ago, or maybe almost 4 now, at the 50th anniversary, it sold more copies than all the years combined, I'm told. I don't know if that's real.
Okay.
It is the book that's responsible for starting the young adult literature category. It's the number one category in books. I don't know, you're a rock guy, what's the first rock record? What's the first hip hop record? First jazz? I mean, we could fight about this. This is the stuff people argue about. Real people who like are really, we know who the first.
Everybody says Black Sabbath, but it's got to be like MC5.
Everybody says Robert Johnson. I don't know. I mean, how far do you want to go back?
Oh, I say Black Sabbath for metal.
For metal, right?
That's
But
what I'm thinking.
again, you could also, that's debatable. You could also say Venom, but for that term for metal. But who knows? I don't. It's debatable. What's not debatable is the young adult book category, which is the number one category. It was started by a 15-and-a-half-year-old named S.C. Hinton. There should be statues all over that town, and they're not. And now they get it. So I put plaques from the Rumblefish. We're putting a plaque at the cinema where she wrote about in the book, and we have a whole plaque program. And I'm just collecting like there's no tomorrow, because there is no tomorrow. I live every day like it's my last day. I'm passionate about what I do, and I want to make a museum that will encompass all of the work of S.C. Hinton, so future generations of kids can
That's
go,
so cool.
wow, this little girl failing English and a D+ in creative writing, who they cloaked her name to be S.C. Hinton, so we didn't know if she was a boy or a girl. Because boys were not going to read a book in 1967 that a girl wrote about little gang struggles against rich and poor, and so it just becomes my thing, and I feel like a gatekeeper, and I try not to ever step on the actors' toes. I don't lean on them for any support. I don't ask for anything from them. I want the work to speak for itself. I don't need anything from anybody. And then the number one, like I said, the fan base is, we were just checking in a hotel and the guy was like, Tulsa. And then we said, he heard me say The Outsiders. He goes, the book, the movie? I said, yeah. He's like, I was just watching. I was just talking to my friend. He was, your boy was shocked because he's like, he's younger than us, so he don't know, I got t-shirts older than your boy right there, he's 30 something. So
he's
he didn't know, he's green, but.
Old school, old soul.
And
Old soul.
he didn't know The Outsiders, but that's fine. That means there's growth for you, my friend. So I expect your report on my desk by Monday.
Yeah, man.
The legacy carries on, man. There was supposed to be a musical, The Outsiders Reimagined. It went to Chicago and then COVID hit. So I don't know what the status of that is. And there was also apparently supposed to be a reboot of a TV show based on something else. It's like a prequel. I don't want to release any. So there's always a new, fresh bunch of 7th graders who it's required reading for in English. And they tour this house Monday through Friday. We have schools come through. And it's like being invited to the Willy Wonka and Chocolate Factory if you're a kid. I mean, these kids have just read the book. They go see it at the movie theater where it was filmed, and then they come to the house and they're like, oh my God. And the house is not just the house. I redid it to make you feel like you were in the movie when it was filmed.
Dude, I want to go. That's
Come
cool.
on. The flight's leaving
We're
tomorrow.
gonna get
You can
Ryan to
jump on.
go. He's got to watch the movie.
Yeah, that's it.
Dude, man, thank you for being on the
I
show,
appreciate
brother.
it, man. No. It's been you know.
Thank you so
I
much.
saw when I've watched a few episodes, and when I seen Lethal on there, I'm like, oh, I see how you're doing it. You're out there doing
Dude,
it.
Lethal
big.
got
So-
me you on here too.
I know
man.
he's great, and
the man.
listen, to talk about this now, like I said, for me, it's bonus round. So even I get excited to talk about it because I feel like, I'll close with this. We were talking about the Kid 90 thing, and at the end, my girl was crying, and I was like, I felt some type of way when I saw all the people who had passed away, and not to get all dramatic, but the fact that I'm not on that list is like
And look
even
what you're doing
impressive.
now.
It's
Yeah.
impressive to me because there's no reason why I shouldn't have made it past that era anyway, the way I was going. So I feel like every day is a blessing. I live in gratitude, and my whole thing is just to give back. And God found a way for me to give back that didn't feel like it was doing work. And it's the outsider's house. I just show up, I open it, and I just let people do what they want to do and experience the collection. And so
Dude, I feel like
that's
we
the way
should
I
hug,
give it
man.
back. Come on,
This
man,
is
bring it
good.
in.
Bring it in,
Some
brother.
man loving going on. Don't be shy, grab a guy. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, dude. Thank you for being on the show, brother. And you were tall.
Drink of
Tallest
water.
man ever. Yeah, you're tall
man.
drink of water.
I appreciate you, man.
Good company.